So here we are. Hello. I have to do that tonight because we are going to be addressing this wonderful story about Jerry Seinfeld. But good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the fourth episode of Pontificating with Pete. It has officially become a mainstay. We made it. Linda D. Now it's Jerry Seinfeld. I do like that. And why does everybody call me a Zionist? It's totally not who I am. I just respect the state of Israel, and everything that they want to do is perfectly within the legal limits. Come on. You know, we're going to get into it a little later, but it is kind of amazing how he goes to such lengths to promote this movie that he just had come out, the Pop-Tarts movie, whatever the hell that was called. Yeah, Colin, if you remember the name, what's the name of that Pop-Tarts movie that he just released? Toasted. Toasted. It just came to mind for some reason. Yeah, it's pathetic. But that is Jerry, and that is who he is. No, Jen is not my wife. She is my business partner. But thanks for asking. I know that there is confusion. I say that I'm her work husband. I'm okay with that. You know? And there are obviously a lot of stories that we want to cover this evening. I believe my friend Kiera Hall is going to be here shortly. She did work on the RFK campaign. This is kind of a last minute thing because it was brought to my attention that she is no longer with the campaign. And she is here now. And we're going to have a nice graphic set up. So that way she doesn't have to feel. She's not going to be on camera. She's going to be doing audio only. But she is a very accomplished young lady who actually was successfully able to form a PAC while she was in college. And lots more to share regarding her story. But I think it is very important because she and I did meet at RFK's official launch in Philadelphia back in October. And obviously a lot has changed since then. But like a lot of these big campaigns that have great aspirations in terms of what they want to accomplish, being able to manage it without all of the dead weight that comes with these bigger campaigns is a very big problem. And I know she's going to speak to that at great length. So without further ado, Kiera Hall, welcome to Pontificating with Pete.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
It's great to see you and catch up with you again. I hope you don't mind the still photo that we've used. I hope you're accepting of that one.
Absolutely. This is one of my favorites.
Where was that taken? That does look like it could be DC. I'm not sure, though.
So this is my apartment building at the time in 2021, overlooking DC, technically in Arlington, Virginia. The organization I was involved with in 2021 was in Virginia. So I wanted to make sure I was officially on Virginia dirt when I took this photo.
Well, I happen to love Northern Virginia. I happen to really love Alexandria, but I just happen to really love that whole region of the country. You know, I'm not a big city person per se, but I could live in DC. That's like the one major city that I can live in. And ironically enough, you meet a lot of people in DC that make you not want to live there, but there's something very patriotic and nostalgic about the city, and that's the type of stuff that I love. I'm assuming that you do have a love of nostalgia for the good old red, white, and blue.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've been involved in politics really my whole life. My family wasn't super political growing up, but I was taken to rallies, town halls, things like that. And I just loved it. It's kind of the one thing in my life that's always made sense to me, for me. And so I started officially volunteering for campaigns on my own in middle school and high school and decided that's what I wanted to pursue in college.
So you
And
have to have
so
seen the movie. You have to have seen the movie Election with Reese Witherspoon and Matthew Broderick. Am I right about that?
I have not.
Oh my God! All right, you're Reese.
Maybe like
You're
20
Reese
years ago.
Witherspoon. I'm the,
Maybe
listen.
I have.
You have a little bit of a look like Reese Witherspoon, but I am telling you, see this movie. It'll make complete sense to you once you see it.
Okay. Well, yeah. So, back to DC, I wanted to go to American University, or, I was considering some DC schools at the time, and that's what I ended up doing. So, spent a good 12 years in the DMV, and like you said, it is a magical place. I had the opportunity to work in Congress, and for all the, you know, black that Congress gets, and rightfully so. There are a lot of things that actually function in our government, and I think when you are in DC, you get the opportunity to see that side of it, which is great. And as many Americans have had the opportunity to do, seeing the National Mall, part of our national park system, is really just a fantastic feat of what Americans are able to accomplish when we put our minds to something and are able to get those like public works. So I always tell people in DC, or folks around the country, come to DC, visit. It's your tax dollars. You've already paid for it, and so you might as well enjoy it.
That is a very excellent point, and I think when we did meet, I had mentioned that my favorite president is Teddy Roosevelt, and obviously one of the most amazing things that he did do was start the national park system, which I think is essential. But we all know that um, it's one thing to have what we have, but then, like Ben Franklin once said, you do have a republic if you can keep it. And right now, it does seem like we're having a very hard time keeping it for a litany of different reasons, not the least of which is the complete corporate capture of our government, which is a huge problem. A lot of people are done with the two-party duopoly. We'll obviously get into the minutia of the things that happened with you and RFK, but being I believe you're Gen Z. Just from your perspective, and the fact that there is such a significant portion, especially the 18 to 29 demographic, that does not want any part of the two-party duopoly anymore. Can you speak to, sort of your political evolution and how you got to the point where you ended up working with somebody like RFK?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm actually, to correct you, I'm 30, almost 31. So I think that makes me a true millennial. But I do.
All right. So then from one millennial to another millennial, please.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I grew up as a Democrat. I grew up as a strong Democrat. Growing up, I think that identity as a Democrat provided me a lot of things. It provided me inclusion into a group of people who were focused around a common goal. It provided me a sense of virtue that I was a good person because of these things that I believed in, and that
Yeah.
I was working towards something that was bigger than myself. And that D next to my name, next to my registration, that meant I was a good person. And of course, I wasn't affiliated with the Democratic Party just for the optics, right? These were things that I believed in. But I think affiliation with a party, especially when you're younger, but all throughout your life, it gives you sort of a North Star politically of pointing to what you believe in. It's really rather impossible or unrealistic for one person to be well versed on every issue that might come up over the course of a legislative session, whether that's in their local town council, local state legislature, or Congress. And so parties do provide this vital service of distilling down these issues into, easily digestible platforms that we can all understand and get behind. And so as a Democrat, I continued to learn and evolve and mature with what that meant, and definitely considered myself progressive. There was a time as I evolved as a Democrat, as a staffer, and for context, I've worked on every level of political campaigns from presidential to school board and everything in between, and have always worked for Democrats with a focus at different times for on the left sector of the Democratic Party. So progressives, people who were challenging the establishment, people who were maybe outsiders to the party, people who were pushing progressive agendas, things like universal basic income and forgiving student loans. I was working on those campaigns back in 2016, 17, 18, before AOC was a household name, right?
Yeah.
And so that was always um, sort of where I fell across the ideological spectrum. In 2021, I started an organization to fight corporate corruption in Virginia. Virginia has some of the most egregious campaign finance
Oh,
laws
yeah.
at the state level, or lack thereof, however you want to word it. We have some of the most well-funded corporate candidates on both sides of the aisle. We have candidates who are taking the vast majority of their political contributions to their campaigns coming from corporations. So if you rank all of their contributions, and again, we don't have contribution limits, meaning at the federal level, organizations are limited on how much they can give to a candidate. In Virginia, there is no limit. We have state legislative candidates, right? These are local candidates receiving hundreds and thousands of dollars from just a corporation, and we have candidates who, if you list all of their contributions from highest to lowest dollar amount, you have to get to page 8 on their finance report before you see a live human being, because the first 7 pages are all corporations. And
Amazing.
so, and it's on both sides. It's Democrats and Republicans, and that
Yeah.
right there was a big moment in my sort of ideological evolution, because I had grown up thinking that Democrats were the virtuous ones. We're the ones fighting the good fight. We're the ones that are doing things based on morals and integrity and transparency and for the working person, right? We're not with the big bad wolves. And going through this process in Virginia, and I had, it unfolded over the course of several months and years, but no, Democrats were a big part of the problem, especially in the, fighting corporate finance, corruption in campaigns. A lot of the things that we tried to do to implement policy changes in Virginia were stopped by Democrats. Democrats didn't want campaign finance reform in Virginia. And that really made me think about who the problems were, right? And what I believed in. And there's a lot that goes on, the story of my personal political evolution. There's a lot that goes into it. Also, just maturing and having life experience, having experience meeting a lot of different people, having experience traveling the world, and really thinking about redefining um, where I was also part of the problem by identifying this good versus bad mentality, right? Me being a Democrat made me good, and anybody else who wasn't a Democrat was bad.
Yeah.
And sort of bringing to the surface why that philosophy was problematic in itself.
I definitely agree. There is, and that's it's not really necessarily an all-encompassing component of being a Democrat, but definitely being a liberal. There is this sort of a holier than art thou attitude, especially when it comes to comparison to, let's say, a conservative, for example. The moral high ground, if you will, that one thinks that they have. But as we've seen, what moral high ground do you really have when you're comparing the brass tacks of everything that's going on right now? Yeah, Trump is who he is, but the biggest problem that I think people tend to fall into is this idea that, well, if we just got rid of him, everything will be fine. No, it's a system that's rotten to the core, and the corporate takeover of our government at the federal and state, and to an even big degree, local level, is a huge part of this problem. And wanting to find a different path forward is a huge part of that. And I think that that's where, the likes of RFK, of Dr. Cornel West, of Jill Stein, and, anybody else that you could think of, that while there may not be, at least for the two latter, that, don't have a lot of viability, but I do think that there are people that really thought, and maybe there is still some truth to it, that there is viability behind RFK's campaign. He is most likely going to be on most ballots, which is a huge step. And he does have a lot of money behind him. He is a Kennedy, after all, and a lot of people are just frankly done with this two-party system. However, you did have the experience of working on his campaign, and I know that you were there for a considerable amount of time, but you're not there anymore. And with your quote in the New Yorker being what it was, I am curious as to what were the elements that attracted you initially to his campaign, and where did things ultimately go off the rail? I know that there are some obvious components to the grifting class, as I like to call the consultant class in politics, but I would imagine that there's more to it as far as where you stand.
That's a great question, and I will try to answer all those points in a way that is productive and respectful to all involved, but also
Sure.
educational, because I do feel like my story matters. And I think that my point of view matters, especially to voters trying to make decisions, and even, consultants and staffers who are considering taking jobs on either this campaign or another campaign. So I'll try to answer this in a way that's constructive rather than destructive. So I came to RFK's campaign and movement, really, At the time, 2023, just a year ago, I was working at my PAC. I was still working primarily on the Democratic side. 95% of our funding was coming from big Democratic donors. We had a couple sort of wild card donors, right, or token conservative donors, but um, very much like in the Democratic ecosystem. And I was just, as we discussed, going through my own ideological evolution. I'm a autodidact. I'm a self-taught person. Whenever I have a question about life or the universe, I read about it. And I was just reading information about political ideology, corporate corruption, of course, economics, and that led me to a lot of folks who ended up being involved with RFK's movement, but I had already sort of researched them independently. These were voices that I was familiar with and respected. And so, like, I'll give you an example. Charles Eisenstein, he has a 500-page book on economics, sacred economics, that was sitting on my coffee table. And RFK announces, I really didn't know much about him, did not know about his work or his advocacy. And but what I did see is these voices like Charles and like Aubrey Marcus and different people who had been really foundational to my own self-actualization journey and self-improvement journey were supporting him. And so I, despite what a lot of people had told me about this candidate and this movement, thought he's definitely worth taking a look at because these are the people who align with where I'm at politically and spiritually, and they're supporting him, right? So that was the biggest draw for me, is sort of trust the process, trust that these people that I trust are using discernment and that they are going to lead me down the right path. And so the story of how I actually got the job and got involved is kind of wild and crazy. And the shortest explanation is that I manifested it. I kind of just put it out there to the universe and said, if it's meant to be, it'll be. And I mean, the wildest series of events took place where it just became an opportunity in my reality. Um, to me, there has to be some proof of higher power involvement there, because the things that had to happen for this opportunity to fall in my lap was just crazy. Anyway, so I said, let's go for it, right? It's clear that this is something that's being brought into my awareness, my attention, and it's something that I want to explore. I had some questions before I joined the campaign. Um, as a vaccinated person and a person who has volunteered at my local vaccine drives, that was an important question to me. As part of my political and ideological evolution, it wasn't so important to me that I see eye to eye or one to one on every issue with someone, right? Whether that be someone I'm working for, someone I'm working with. But I wanted to understand them, and I wanted to understand where there's room for nuance and where there's room for construction and where there's room for diversity of thought. And so I went to some friends. I'm blessed to have a lot of friends in a lot of different sectors. And I went to a few of my friends who are medical doctors, and I said, can you take a look at what he's saying and tell me what if it makes sense? And we were able to have some discussions about things that they saw in it that were interesting, thought provoking, and then of course there were things that they said this makes no sense. But there was enough there. There was enough substance there where I felt confident that even if I wasn't, 100% on all the issues, being 100% on every issue at this point is pretty unrealistic with anyone, especially when we all have our you know, the deeper that you go into some of these subjects, the more unrealistic that is that you're going to be so aligned, because there's just so many things that go into any one thing. And so I felt confident that what he was talking about in terms of economics and corporate corruption and campaign finance and personal freedom and sort of the spiritual evolution and healthcare and this essence that his campaign had about, we're going to restore, the sanctity of personhood through self-actualization for Americans, that the, emphasis on health and fitness and mental health, that was a big draw for me. And so I joined the campaign in August of 2023, just left now within the past couple weeks, so was there for about 8 or 9 months. And it was a challenging experience. I don't think that I'm the first person to speak out about that publicly. There are other articles that are around right now, sort of talking about what the experience internally has been for staff in terms of being high staff turnover, in terms of there being sort of strange um, policies and strange sort of threads amongst the company culture. Um, I don't really want to go into the details of what those are specifically, other than things that I've already talked about publicly. But you can look them up, and they're all true. I mean, from my personal experience, everything that's written in the media is true, and I think that it's um, really a shame that more hasn't been talked about publicly. And I know why that is. It's because everyone's afraid to talk about what's going on in that campaign, and how strange and odd it truly is. Um, when you leave an organization like that, and we've had, again, extremely high staff turnover, I think at this point, and this is not an official number, this is my perspective, and something, a guesstimate that I would put out there. I've probably seen in my time there 40 or 50 people resign. And every person who resigns has the same sort of sentiment in their resignation letter. Um, and, there is feedback coming from staff to the campaign about things that need to change, things that aren't working, things that they're hearing from the public, systems and internal processes that are broken, abuses that are happening, financial, mismanagement and poor stewardship of resources. I mean, it's not these one-off complaints from a disgruntled employee. It's patterns of very smart, accomplished, respectful, professional people saying the same things over and over and over again. And there is just no feedback loop. It's a one-directional feedback loop, right? You have tens of people saying the same thing about what needs to change, and there's never any change. And so there's a lot to my story, and what I experienced personally, and what I witnessed personally. I will say that at the time that I left the campaign, there wasn't a big event or sort of abuse or injustice, or altercation, or conflict that happened that caused me to leave the campaign. It was a buildup and a pattern of things that I couldn't stand behind, and this process that I was going through internally of weighing how much good does it take to outweigh the bad, right? And at what point do the scales balance out? I mean, there's so much good in that campaign. There are so many people that I just adore, and I
They're
wish
there for the right
America
reasons.
could. I'm sorry?
They're there for the right reasons.
Yeah, and people that I wish that America could meet, because they would just fall in love with some of these people. And some of these people have taught me things, and they have supported me, and they have inspired me, and they have encouraged me. And it was grief. I mean, leaving was grief, because I knew that most likely I'd be severing relationships with a lot of great people, by not being a part of it and by speaking publicly. And so it's sad. I miss those folks, but again, there's only so much that I think the virtuous side can compensate for when there is that mismanagement, and there is that darkness, and there is that shadow.
I think that's an excellent point. The whole experience of being in Philadelphia that day, and, being in the press corps and meeting all different types of amazing people. And they were there. There's no question about it. It was about 4,000 people, give or take. But it was very unique seeing the whole political spectrum in many ways all in one place. I ran into a gentleman that I knew from New Jersey that was there, and obviously we met. Uh, I do think that there are little things that one can point to as to where the campaign really went in the wrong direction without you even needing to comment. I do believe the switch at the top with Kucinich and Fox probably had a lot to do with it. Uh, and obviously, there's a lot of other things that come along the way to consider why this campaign, which did have a lot of promise, I did think that he could be a threat, and he probably still could be, just because how many people are just tired of the current, two-party duopoly and want to move on to something else. The things that he talked about that I personally agreed with was what he addressed regarding the issue of the corporate capture within private equity, particularly BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard, and how they are basically going to own 60% of the single-family homes in this country by the end of this decade, which is, if that doesn't scare people, especially in our respective generation and the one below us, I don't know what does, because building generational wealth is something that is going to be very, very difficult to do for a lot of people going forward. As far as the issues pertaining to where he stood on vaccines, some of it was understandable, other parts of it were not. But for me, the big dividing issue for him, and what I actually think could have made the difference in his campaign in a substantial way, was where he stood on Israel, and the fact that he had somebody like Rabbi Shmuley basically as one of his right-hand people, really says a lot to me about his misguided viewpoint as far as how he wanted to go about running this campaign. And especially with everything that's going on now in Gaza, and the fact that neither of the two major candidates are saying what needs to be said, in terms of how you deal with this situation that's going on over there, which is a genocide. And so the fact that he had this opening to do something and he didn't take it, or for whatever reason he hasn't, to me says a lot about these missed opportunities that we have. I mean, I want to believe that we're going to head in the direction of generational change, no pun intended being the official name of the channel. But I do feel like this isn't one of those like missed opportunities where, okay, well, we're done now. No, I do think that a lot more people are starting to come together along the grounds of the core issues that really do drive us as a collective, whether it's healthcare, whether it's the environment, especially the water and the air, when it comes to endless war, when it comes to the current economic situation pertaining to a living wage with our jobs, the ability to get an education, specifically being able to learn a trade, things of that nature. Those things are substantially important. And anyone within the political arena who isn't too far gone, I do think that these types of conversations are essential, because that is the only way we're ever going to get to that positive future that you and I think, and most people in the chat and everyone that's here would agree on, is that the corporate capture of our government is the singular issue that is basically destroying our country from within. And how we're able to overcome that obstacle is going to be very, very difficult. But that doesn't mean that it can't happen. Because I do think as every day goes forward, a lot more people are waking up to the reality of where our political system stands today. And I would imagine more than anything else, you made some really solid friendships and relationships over the course of this campaign. And I have no doubt that you're going to take that experience and it's going to make you an even more effective, active political aficionado in whatever capacity you're going to, be involved in going forward. I have no doubt that while it has ended, and obviously has ended in a way that I'm sure you didn't want it to, having that experience is something that I think will pay dividends in the future. Your final thoughts on that as we wrap up?
Yeah, so I've been working in politics for a long time, and I don't know what my future holds. I think looking at RFK and the independent movement, I had so much hope there. And my hope tank is depleted right now. I don't know what it will take to replenish it, or if I'm being pulled somewhere else in my life. I'm not working in politics right now. Granted, I just left the campaign 2 weeks ago, so I
Breathe.
feel like I feel like I need to do justice to myself and to the campaign and to my future potential clients, and have a really good cooling off self-care period, because it was a lot. I mean, working there was hard. It was hard on me spiritually and mentally, and hard on my body. And that's saying a lot, because I've been on a lot of campaigns and I've been in a lot of toxic campaigns. This one was special. And sort of
Well, you've
closing
already got
thoughts.
you've already got the lingo down flat. So kudos to you. They can never
Well,
accuse you of saying something bad, even if you are.
Well, and in closing thoughts, for America about Kennedy, because I do feel like I have a privileged position as being an informed person, not just about the campaign, but an informed person about politics and how the system works in general. Plus, I have this experience working on the campaign. Plus, I have this experience now of going from being someone who thought I could never be indoctrinated and thought I was such this free thinker, individualistic person, and here I go and sort of join this what I consider to be a kind of extremist movement, pretty much overnight, and really get sucked in a way that was profound. And I think what was really scary about my experience with that movement is that, again, it pretty much happened overnight. And I had so many people reaching out to me saying, "Hey, I want to talk to you about this. I don't think that this is the best thing for you, or I want to share stories of what I know about that movement with you." And the more criticism I would hear about Kennedy or about the campaign, the farther in it would drive me. I used that as proof of what we were doing was right. And so, it's been a good experiential learning opportunity because I've learned a lot about what it's like to be on the inside of one of these movements. And it's helped me think about how I don't think that anybody who's inside of it right now, I don't think that there's anything that I can do or say to make them question what they're doing, or if what they're doing is worth it or virtuous or in support of the ultimate common good. But I do think that potentially my story and talking about it and talking to people who have friends and family who might get sucked into this stuff, I do think that sharing my story could potentially prevent future instances of people going through what I did. And so I do feel like I want to use my voice and my story in a way that's respectful, legal, right? I signed an NDA at, the Kennedy campaign infamously has one of the most ironclad vetting and NDA processes in the industry. That's also been
Sure.
wildly reported on, which is a little bit ironic for a campaign that's such, in favor of whistleblowing and free speech, right? Um, and so and I will say that for a campaign that's about healing the divide, right? I encountered a lot of these types of contradictions, right? We're about free speech, but not when it comes to this campaign, right? We're about healing the divide and bringing people together. But if you're not a free thinker, if you're not an anti-vaxxer, you're stupid, right? It's these I encountered these contradictions daily, and it really I mean, honestly, every other day I felt like I was questioning my reality and questioning what I believed in, what was right, what was wrong, what was up, what was down, especially with so many diverse opinions within the movement. It's a lot to take in at any given moment. And I, again, just want to caution people out there that see Kennedy or see anyone as part of this movement. Just because someone's good at pointing out problems and pointing out potential links between these hardships and very real instances of corruption that are taking place every day in our society. I'm not denying that those aren't happening, but that's a different thing than someone being able to come in and create and enact solutions to those problems. And what I learned on this campaign is that candidates, as part of this movement, and again, I'm not naming a specific candidate, can be really, really good at talking and really, really good at talking in a way that makes people go, "Yeah, I've always thought that." And you just put that into words, or "I'm glad someone else gets it," right? They get me, they get it. They can get it all day, but that does not translate into being able to fix it. And if your organization of 100 people is failing because of lack of internal policies that work, lack of policies for getting rid of people who are just toxic and abusive and taking advantage of resources. If you can't manage 100 people, the idea of managing an administration where your internal office staff of the White House staff, right, you're already into the thousands, and then you're managing all of these government agencies. I mean, you're managing essentially, as the president of the United States, millions of people. That scares me. And I want people to
Yeah.
think about that and what kind of person and what kind of experience we need in that position. And if being able to identify problems, again, is the same thing as being able to enact solutions.
I definitely agree. I do think that you can identify a lot of the problems that exist, and that's one of the things. Frankly, that's one of the things that Trump is very good at. But it also doesn't mean that his intentions are that of what is in the best interest of the people. I thought Bernie did a phenomenal job of that back in 2016, in particular. I was a big supporter of his at the time, and now I see RFK talking on these topics that are very important to all of us. But I'm always asking myself, why is he the only one who's doing it? It does feel like we are in a very unique time right now, and things are probably going to, you know, spiral downward, and even worse than they already are. But that doesn't mean that we can't learn from this. And throughout the experience, the fact that you and I met, I'm sure that there will be opportunities going forward where we'll be able to brainstorm and work effectively together. Uh, I treat it very similarly to the way things are when I'm in commercial real estate and I go to an event and I meet, let's say, 100 people. But I know when I'm walking away from that event that even of those people that I met, if I get to work with 2 or 3 of them, that's a lot. Um, but those can turn out to be really solid foundational relationships. And you build from that. I met a lot of people that day in Philadelphia, and you definitely stood out. Um, there were a few people that did, but there were also a few people that were, way, way out there, including one gentleman who is a very wealthy and huge benefactor for RFK. And he is as anti vax as anybody I have ever met. I mean, ever met. Like, he is full throated. He never vaccinated his kids and blah, 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 and all that stuff. So, you really do have this sort of heavy pendulum swing in terms of, where the appeal lies. But I still think that speaks to the greater concern for just how far the country has sank in terms of our political discourse, in terms of, the wealth gap. There are so many variables to consider, but I do think that you bring a lot of amazing, qualities to the table. And, even though this particular experience didn't work out, there are going to be many others going forward. I know the old argument of, well, do I put RFK's experience on my resume? Of course you do, because ultimately the experience matters a lot, but the integrity is what takes you to the next level, because they're always looking for the people that have the best interests. I'm in a similar situation right now, where I'm trying to make sure that anyone who's involved with what I'm doing down here in South Florida, that they have integrity. It isn't necessarily that they worked with a given, political representative, although of course you want to draw the line in some respects, but just the wherewithal to go through what these campaigns request of you, what they demand of you. It's very taxing, to say the least, and they typically take advantage of those who are well intended. Those who are ill intended, they often seem to be the ones that are, the ones who always seem to stick around and always get the highest paying jobs. Because again, it is the system that has corrupted us to a T. But that doesn't mean it can't change. And that is why I hope that this conversation has, in some respects, been therapeutic. I love hearing your story. I think it is very important that people do hear it. And I'm not here to bash, Bobby, or, for where anybody else stands. I just think people need to hear the truth. That politics is a dirty business. And if you want to be involved in it, you don't have to be dirty, but you're going to have to work with people that are. There is no getting around it. How you handle that, that's the key. If anybody wants to follow your work, anything that you're doing, Kiera, going forward, how can they follow you?
So all of my socials are Hall of Kiera, HALLOF, Kiera, KIERA. I am currently bartending in Louisville, Kentucky. So I do post about that on my socials. I am having a lot of fun with it and feel like I'm actually doing a lot of good ministering to folks at the bar who come in and having a lot of really great, sometimes silly, but sometimes really profound conversations with dozens of people a day. And in a lot of respects, I feel like I'm doing more impactful work there than I ever did on that campaign. So that says a lot right there. But if you want to follow my political consultant to bartender to who knows what's next? I'm finishing grad school right now, and I am working on a couple certifications and working on some personal writing projects. So I share a lot about faith and spirituality and self-actualization, things like that too on my socials. So if that's interesting to you, I would love, love, love to connect with other folks bi-directionally as well. I love, meeting people on social media and exchanging ideas. So please feel free to follow me, DM me, let's talk. And thank you so much, Peter. It was great, being able to jump on short notice, and thank you for holding this space. And I think you hit the nail on the head. This was a therapeutic conversation that, is sort of one of a series of conversations that I've had as part of this deconstruction. First, my deconstruction from the duopoly, and then now my deconstruction from the anti-duopoly. And I'm not really sure where that lands me now. I feel like I've sort of made a full circle, but if we flip that circle onto its side, it's no longer two-dimensional and, somewhere in this new ideological plane that I like to think of as more of a 3D, 4D model. I think I can find my place.
I think you definitely will, and I think you're definitely in one of the better states to do it in. I think Kentucky has a pretty decent governor for a Democrat in Bashir, and obviously you have the best Republican congressman by far in Thomas Massie. So you gotta work with what you got, but I know you're going to land on your feet and land solid, and you're going to do great things. So let's keep that conversation going, and we will definitely be in touch.
All right. Thank you, everyone, so much.
Thanks, Kiera. We'll be in touch. So I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation. As I said, I met Kiera in Philadelphia when RFK announced his campaign. I wasn't going to mention this when she was on, so I'll mention it now. In a world of Emily Austin's, be a Kiera Hall, because I met Emily Austin in Philadelphia. I haven't mentioned this before, but I met Emily Austin. She and I talked for quite a while. I even have her phone number. I had no idea who she was at the time. Honest to God, I didn't know who she was. But seeing how she was so close to the Kennedy campaign for somebody who, you probably wouldn't believe this, but Emily Austin is only, I think she's only 21. I'm pretty sure that's it. She's very young. She doesn't look, I'm not saying she looks old, but she don't look 21. She looks a lot older than that. But this young lady, tall, attractive blonde like Kiera, is on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. She is as Zionist and as bloodthirsty as anybody. And I mean anybody. Now, of course, I don't talk to her, but you live and you learn. And she is somebody who is supporting RFK. And the thing about RFK that should upset us all is that we're so desperate to get somewhere outside of this two-party stranglehold, whether it is Trump or Biden, which again is like, what pile of doo-doo are you willing to eat? I don't think a lot of people really want to eat it anymore. So we get stuck in these very dangerous situations because the country is sort of breaking at the seams. And while we're so hoping and trying to grasp at whatever straws we can for real, uncorrupted leadership, it's hard to find it. It really is. And it makes us all feel like we're missing something here. And no better example that I can show you guys right now. I really do think that this is important to note why we're sinking so fast. So for those of you who are not aware, I believe that Nancy Pelosi was in British Parliament, I want to say, the other day. But she had some wonderful things to say regarding populism. Let's play it because it's really not going to be surprising, is it?
Of these poor souls who are looking for some answers. We've given them to them, but they're blocked by some of their views on guns. They have the 3 Gs, guns, gays, God, that would be a woman's right to choose.
She is, first of all, she is so incoherent in the way that she talks now. I mean, she's really been off for a while. I used to always attribute it to just hitting the bottle early in the morning, with all due respect. But she's out there saying that desperate souls want populism. Yeah, because they're desperate and you don't do anything to help them. In fact, you've made their lives infinitely worse since you've been at the head of the Democratic Party power establishment over the past 3 or 4 decades. You're a big part of the problem, Nancy Queen Pelosi. Guns, gods, and Oxford University. Thank you, Travis. I knew it was in the UK. I wasn't exactly sure. Colin, I know this clip doesn't have the full extent of the conversation I wanted you to clip. I want to have the additional response coming from the gentleman who responded to her, that I believe is part of that Rising clip that I had sent over to you. So if you can, I don't know if you can grab that real quick, but I want to be able to see his rebuttal, which was very powerful. And of course, the response online has been very devastating towards Pelosi. Not that she cares, but the repudiation of neoliberalism is on full display here. And all she's doing is continuing down this road of suggesting that and this is the problem, and why neoliberalism leads to fascism, because for her, everything's fine. You're just complaining. God, guns, and gays. That's could you believe the ish that comes out of her mouth? I mean, it's absolutely, it's spellbinding how bad this gets with her. But let's finish it up.
Who are looking for some answers. We've given them to them, but they're blocked by some of their views on guns. They have the 3 Gs, guns, gays, God, that would be a woman's right to choose. And the cultural issues cloud some of their reception of an argument that really is in their interest.
Okay. Did you follow any of the shit that she just said? Because I couldn't follow it. She's just out there. She's just out there at this point. Like, she has these thoughts that she wants to get out, but basically she wants to tell you to get off her lawn, among other things. I think you're right. I don't think she's ever done a real day's work in her life. And I think that that's what ends up happening. Because, if you look back when Pelosi got into Congress in the mid-'80s, she did have a progressive streak. And I know that she was working on single-payer healthcare up until about the time Clinton got into office. So it wasn't very long. But ultimately, you evolve and you just get right with how things are. And then she became the most prolific stock trader this world has ever seen. I mean, really, there is a social media page devoted to following Nancy Pelosi's stock trading. And she's out here telling you that populism is evil. You don't need it. You just need more neoliberalism. That's the answer. We're doing just fine. Joe is doing great. And if you want to be a Putin apologist, if you want to be a Trump apologist, which are her go-to lines, well, here we have a rebuttal at Oxford to Pelosi's neoliberal BS.
Populism is not a threat to democracy. Populism is democracy.
You damn right it is.
Obama argued Bernie was the populist. It was Bernie who'd spent 5 decades fighting for working people. But Trump. Something curious happens. If you watch Obama's speeches after that point, more and more recently, he uses the word populist interchangeably with strongman, with authoritarian. The word changes meaning. It becomes a negative, a pejorative, a slur. To me, populism is not a dirty word. Since the 2008 crash, and specifically the trillion-dollar Wall Street bailout, we are in the populist age. And for good reason. The elites have failed. Let me address some common fallacies, some of which have been made tonight. If the motion was that demagoguery was a threat to democracy, I would be on that side of the House. If the motion was that political violence was a threat to democracy, I'd be on that side of the House. January 6th has been mentioned. A dark day for America indeed. And I'm sure Congresswoman Pelosi will agree that the entire month of June 2020, when the federal courthouse in Portland, Oregon was under siege and under insurrection by radical progressives, those too were dark days for America.
Is that her trying to raise her hand? Excuse me, excuse me. You're not allowed to question me like that. This guy's good. Travers, I don't know if you know who he is or if there's any light that you can shed. But yeah, let's finish this out.
Yes.
There is no equivalence of it. So that, yes.
So you don't agree? That's fine. You don't agree. That's fine.
But it is not like what happened on January 6th, which was an insurrection incited by the President of the United States.
So you don't agree? But you'll condemn those days. My point, though, is that all political movements are susceptible to violence and indeed insurrection. And if we were arguing that fascism was a threat to democracy, I'd be on that side of the House. Indeed, the current populist age is a movement against fascism. I've got quite a lot to get through. Populism, as you know, is the politics of the ordinary people against an elite. Populism is not a threat to democracy. Populism is democracy. And why else have universal suffrage if not to keep elites in check? Ladies and gentlemen, given the success of Trump, and more recently Javier Milei taking a chainsaw to the state behemoth of Argentina's bureaucratic monster, you'd be mistaken for thinking this was a right-wing populist age. But that would be ignoring Occupy Wall Street. That would be ignoring Jeremy Corbyn's for the many, not the few. That would be ignoring Bernie against the billionaires, RFK Jr. against Big Pharma, and more recently, George Galloway against his better judgment. Now,
Very good. Very well done. I believe you gave me the full commentary, Colin. This isn't even cut down in any way, but I do like this guy. He really is an effective orator and is getting his point across in a very effective way. And believe me, it takes a lot to do this in front of Pelosi, and I'm sure that it's very cathartic that he's on a roll right now and able to do so.
all of them, including Galloway, recognize genuine concerns of ordinary people being otherwise ignored by the establishment. I'm actually rather surprised that our esteemed opposition, Congressman Pelosi, is on that side of the motion. I thought the left was supposed to be anti-elite. I thought the left was supposed to be anti-establishment. Today, particularly in America, the globalist left have become the establishment.
And there is no arguing against that point. None. He's right. Now, the problem I have, that I'm sure a lot of you would agree, is that the framing is poorly done, which is why anybody who is on the political left, if you will, gets lumped in with this group. It is not the same. There is the elite liberal class and there is the working class left. If you're on the left, more often than not, And I'm not talking about the woke left, where everything is just about social justice warrior shit. I'm talking about people who are in favor of the labor movement. That's the left. What Nancy Pelosi is not the left. And framing it as such is where I take issue with this gentleman. Not to say that a lot of what he said isn't correct, certainly. However, the left and the liberal class are two completely different sectors of politics. No question about it. And she is of the neoliberal hierarchy in our society. She is the establishment, and she in many ways is still the face of the Democratic Party. And is there any doubt that she is the leader over Hakeem Jeffries? She still runs the show. No question about it. If she didn't, then why isn't Mr. Jeffries there? He is the one who apparently is the leader, but I don't know. All signs still point to Pelosi being the one pulling the strings. We'll continue.
I suppose for Ms. Pelosi to have taken this side of the motion, she'd be arguing herself out of a job. But it's here in Britain where right and left populists united for the supreme act of democracy, Brexit. Polls have showed the number one reason people voted for Brexit was sovereignty, for more democracy.
Point of information.
Thank you. What was the response of the Brussels elite? They did everything in their power to undermine the democratic will of the British people, and the Westminster elite were just as disgraceful. As we've heard, David Cameron called the voters fruitcakes, loonies, and closet racists. The Liberal Democrats did everything they could to overturn a democratic vote. Keir Starmer campaigned for a second referendum.
He's not wrong. We have to be objective in how we call these things out. That's the point. Now he comes back with a very strong talking point. They did try to move heaven and earth to overturn the Brexit vote. Whatever happened to the democratic process? You know, we get on that here in this country about not accepting the vote. Well, that's what happened over in the UK. They voted for Brexit. And then they tried to do everything they could to make sure that that vote got thrown out. So just know, we've reached a point where there's dishonesty all around because the system is breaking at the seams.
Elites would have had us voting and voting and voting until we voted their way. Indeed, that's what happened in Ireland and in Denmark. Let's look at some of the other populist movements. The Hong Konger populist revolt is literally called the pro-democracy movement. The farmer revolts from Netherlands to Germany, France, Greece to Sri Lanka. Farmers are taking their tractors to the road to protest ESG policy that's floated down to us from those all-knowing, infallible elites of Davos. The trucker movement in Canada became anti-elitist when petty tyrant Prime Minister Justin Trudeau froze their bank accounts, not the behavior of a democratic head of state. The Gilets jaunes in France, ULEZ in London, working people protesting policy that hurt them. And how are they treated? They're called conspiracy theorists. They're called...
He's right. He is right. Whether you agree with their positions or not, this is what happens. This is the blowback that you receive for going against them. I, in particular, was appalled at what happened to the truckers in Canada. That was absolutely out of bounds, insane in terms of what they were willing to do to try to force the vaccine mandate. That was absolutely insane. As I said, I've been vaccinated. You will never hear me support a mandate. No freaking chance. And the lengths that they went to force them to do it by stealing their money. This is how these movements, and in many ways, as I always like to point out, this is the this is the alternate timeline. It's like Back to the Future 2. This is the Biff Tannen timeline that we have ended up in because of what happened to Bernie Sanders in 2016. If Bernie Sanders had become president instead of Donald Trump, I'm not saying all the problems would have been solved. They wouldn't have been. But you better believe we would have been on the right trajectory towards a left populist movement of finally fighting back against the corporate establishment. And instead, because that was a rigged election against Bernie Sanders, you got Donald Trump. And now we're I don't know how bad this is going to get before things finally change. But my goodness, he's bringing up all the points that would be made right now by a Bernie Sanders left coalition if they were in power. And so many of those working class people who would never cede their support to somebody like Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden found their way over to Donald Trump. Right or wrong, that is what happened. We will continue.
Far right. By the mayor as well. Ladies and gentlemen, populism is the voice of the voiceless. The real threat to democracy is from the elites. Now, don't get me wrong. We need elites. If President Biden has shown us anything, we need someone to run the countries. When the president has severe dementia, it's not just America that crumbles, the whole world burns. But let's examine the elites. European corporations spend over 1 billion euros a year lobbying Brussels. US corporations spend over $2 billion a year lobbying in DC. 2/3 of Congress receive funding from pharmaceutical companies. Pfizer alone spent $11 million in 2021. They made over $10 billion in profit. No wonder then that 66% of Americans think the economy is rigged against them for the rich and the powerful. And by the way, we used to have a word for when big business and big government were in cahoots. And I think any students here of early 20th century Italian history know what I'm talking about.
Fascism.
What about big tech? Throughout the pandemic, Biden's team, the FBI, and the Department of Homeland Security colluded with big tech in censoring dissenting voices, not kooky conspiracy theorists. People like Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, the Stanford epidemiologist. People like Harvard scientist Martin Kulldorff. People spreading true information, not misinformation, true information at odds with the government narrative. Need I remind you, democracy without free speech is not democracy.
And we are losing our free speech rights all day, every day, which is why we have spoken up very loudly and concisely and prophetically in support of Julian Assange and Edward Snowden and many others.
This was a direct breach, by the way, of the First Amendment. Before COVID, intelligence services colluded with big tech to have Trump suspended off Twitter. Yes, the same platform which hosted the Taliban and Ayatollah deaf to Israel Khomeini, they thought the president crossed the line when he tweeted on Jan 6th, quote, "Remain peaceful, no violence, respect the law and our great men and women in blue." That's a quote. You may be thinking now that Trump is a populist. You are right. He didn't accept the 2020 elections, and he should have. So should Hillary in 2016, so should Brussels, and so should Westminster in 2016, and so too should Congresswoman Pelosi, instead of saying the 2016 election was, quote, hijacked.
Oh, right in the gut. Right in the gut. And you know she is fuming listening to this peasant peon speak to the queen in such a way. Oh, there is no way that she isn't like, deal with this man, deal with him. How dare, it's like a Mr. Burns moment. It's like, oh, he's going to get his.
Quote, hijacked. Thank you.
That we don't accept the results of it.
Okay. What about the mainstream media? Let me read you some mainstream media headlines. The New Yorker, the day before the 2016 election. The case against democracy. The Washington Post, the day after the election. The problem with our government is democracy. The LA Times, June 2017. The British election is a reminder of the perils of too much democracy. Vox, June 2017. The two eminent political scientists say the problem with democracy is voters. New York Times, June 2017. The problem with participatory democracy is the participants. Mainstream media elites are part of a class who don't just disdain populism, they disdain the people. If the Democrats had put half their energy into delivering for the people, Trump wouldn't even have a chance in 2024. He shouldn't have a chance. You've had power for 4 years. From the fabricated Steele dossier to trying to take him off the ballot in both Maine and Colorado, the Democrats are the anti-Democrat party. All we need now is the Republicans to come out as the pro-monarchist party.
He is really, really good. Really good. Got to get his name. Got to see if I could try to get him on this podcast. That's the next move.
Ladies and gentlemen, populism is not a threat to democracy, but I'll tell you what is. It's elites ordering social media to censor political opponents. It's police shutting down dissenters, be it anti-monarchists in this country or gender-critical voices here, or last week in Brussels, the National Conservative movement. I'll tell you what is a threat to democracy. It's Brussels, DC, Westminster, the mainstream media, big tech, big pharma, corporate collusion, and the Davos cronies. The threat to democracy comes from those who write off ordinary people as deplorable. The threat to democracy comes from those who smear working people as racists. The threat to democracy comes from those who write off working people as populists. And I'll say one last thing. This populist age can be brought to an end at the snap of a finger. All that needs to be done is for elites to start listening to, respecting, and, God forbid, working for ordinary people. Thank you.
You know what was really interesting about that conclusion? First of all, he got a much louder round of applause than Pelosi did. But did you see who was clapping at the end and she was like, don't do that? Paul Pelosi was clapping. It's almost like, Nancy, you clap for him? He was crapping on me the whole time. Oh, I thought he was inspiring. What am I supposed to say? That was great. Travers, do you know the name of that gentleman who was speaking? I would like to know. He really was sharp. And yes, please, by all means, support these conversations by going to patreon.com/generational change for as little as $5 a month. It is still technically generational change, but it's pontificating with Pete. If you do like to hear my rants and ramblings and conversations with people that come on, these things are important. And your support means a lot. And for those who have supported so far today, Big Dumb Animal, great to see you. Your $4.99 is very much appreciated. And of course, our amazing friend, Danny Wyndham. Learn MMT. For the love of God, just understand whether you agree with it or not. It is what is. It is how money is created and spent. That's it. Don't have to like it. And listen, I'm not going to do a whole deep dive on it, although maybe we'll talk about it on Thursday. But Jimmy Dore decided to have on a super conservative austerity guy on his podcast the other day, talking about how MMT is basically BS. Well, it's not BS. You don't have to agree necessarily with whether or not you believe that money could be printed freely. But again, MMTers talk about the issues related to printing money and it not circulating through the economic system. It gets controlled by the elites, on top of which printing money is supposed to be, or well, not technically printing money, that's how they look at it, but money that is created into the economy is money that has to be directly correlated with where things stand regarding inflation. But remember, corporate greed is why MMT doesn't work in this country today. We have a completely corporate captured government. And there is no question that a lot of the problems that we see today, that we are faced with today, stems from this, again, the whole scene in Back to the Future 2, where they talk about how the timeline skewed into the wrong tangent. And now, instead of having the timeline where somebody like Bernie Sanders became president in 2016 and was driving the populist left movement in the right direction, instead, what you got was the working class could not go with the elite Democratic corporate party. They decided to take a chance, not on the GOP. They took a chance on Trump, and they're likely going to take a chance on him again. And this is exactly why we are in this insanity timeline that we're stuck in right now. But if you think that's bad, if you think the things that we're faced with at this very moment are bad enough, well, now you've got an even more unique circumstance related to Jerry Seinfeld, who has been at the forefront of the Zionist movement. He really is up there. And Colin, if you want to grab that tweet that I put out on Pontificating with Pete from earlier today, it got pretty good traction. Travers, let me know what your request is, please. But we are going to play this clip right now. So for those of you who may or may not be informed, but I'm guessing you probably do know at this point, Jerry Seinfeld, for whatever reason, was the keynote speaker at Duke University over the weekend. I mean, why not? Because Duke is considered the Ivy League of the South. That is what it is known for. It goes without saying that he is as disconnected from regular people as anybody. But never forget, it's Larry David who created Seinfeld. That's a fact.
Jerry is also serving as our commencement speaker today. So, what's the big deal about our commencement speaker?
Now, I can't tell if they're booing Seinfeld or if they're booing the Free Palestine students who are walking out. But remember this, guys. You think about the universities where a lot of this brouhaha has been taking place. Duke, USC, Columbia. These are some of the most elite institutions in the world. Cost, prestige. That to me has a lot to do with this. That's why somebody like Seinfeld is asked to be a keynote speaker at a school like that. You think that they're going to have Jerry Seinfeld be the keynote speaker at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, which is one of the best state institutions in the country? No, he's not going to speak there, but he is going to speak at a school like Duke. That's the difference here, guys. And as I pointed out earlier, Jerry Seinfeld has the detractors that he has, not because he's Jewish, but because he's a Zionist and he's supporting Israel's genocide of the Palestinian people. Here he is posing with an IDF soldier with tons of weapons surrounding him in Israel. And this was, I want to say, a couple of months ago. But as you can see, it is true that the Israel lobby is running out of ideas. What more do they have now? You're booing Jerry Seinfeld because he's Jewish? That's the answer you come up with? That's the reason they don't want to hear from him? Come on. At least try to come up with an excuse. And I'll tell you something else. I would like to pretend that the reason why his Netflix movie Frosted, which is the biggest bomb, yes, the biggest bomb in the history of Netflix. No movie that has been given as much money in advertising to watch as I'm not even going to say the name of the movie because who the hell wants to put any ideas in anybody's head to even go watch it anyway? But the point is, it is the biggest flop in the history of Netflix. And I'd like to believe one of the big reasons why it flopped is because Amy Schumer is one of the stars. I mean, come on, man. I mean, that is absolutely incredible. Why don't people like my comedy? Maybe I'm just not that funny. And what is the deal with the IDF not killing all of the, all the people over there so we can live in paradise? Why do I pretend like I'm a tough guy? I'm really just a sissy Mary who likes to pick up teenage girls when they're in high school and I'm in my 30s. That's true. He is, listen, I'm not going to say he's a pederast. I'm not going there, but he is kind of creepy. And I remember that story. I remember it very well. I didn't really watch Seinfeld because, again, I'm a child of the 80s. I did grow up at that time when Seinfeld was becoming a really big phenomenon in the early mid 90s. But I don't know what it was that I didn't get about Seinfeld. But I'll tell you what I do remember. I didn't like Jerry Seinfeld. I didn't like that stupid smirk on his face every time he was on camera because he can't keep it together. The show is brilliant, but it's brilliant because of Michael Richards, because of Jason Alexander, because of Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and because of Wayne Knight, and especially because of Jerry Stiller. That's why that show was as great as it was. It had nothing to do with Jerry at all. The brainchild of that show was Larry David. Now, I don't know where Larry David stands, but I know that he's not out there promoting what Israel is doing right now. And Jerry is. He is all the way in. And it's not just him. His wife has been raising money for the pro-Israel counter-protests in the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. First of all, let me ask you this. Why would she need to raise any money at all? He's worth over $1 billion. Why not just write a check for $1 million? They probably have, but they want to try to get as much money as they possibly can. Why stop with a little when you can have it all? That's why you get people like Jared Kushner that sit on the boards at the Harvard business, at the Kennedy School, Harvard Business, talking about how, that land, that beachfront land in Gaza could really be something special. You know what I mean? First, we have to blow it to smithereens and get all of the natural gas that's underneath the soil. And then once that's done, then we build our coastal paradise. We've mass murdered, what'll probably amount to at least 100,000 people, maybe more. But you got to do what you got to do. It's business. And when you talk about the atrocities that happen, and there was a very good point that was brought up the other day. I was at a private function that Mehdi Hassan actually was the keynote speaker of. And the one thing that Mehdi said, which he is correct about, was when he addressed the fact that when Trump was president, yes, he didn't start any new wars, but he did drone the shit out of a hell of a lot of people, especially those people in Yemen. Now, Yemen is not something that he started. That's something that goes back to Obama, and that is something that has gone even worse with Biden. But Trump's hands are not clean of any of this shit because no administration is. The war machine is what it is. And when people like Mr. Seinfeld, or as I believe Linda pointed out at the top of the show, Zionfeld, which I think is perfect name. Jerry Seinfeld. Make sure you get it, guys. Write it down. Jerry Seinfeld. That's his name. I petition that we change his name to Jerry Seinfeld. That's who he should be. Why do people always try to make fun of my name? My name is Jerry Seinfeld, not Seinfeld. Stop trying to make me out to be somebody I'm not. Why do I think I'm funny? But I'm really just a schmuck. Because you are Jerry Seinfeld. Useless. Another useless, washed up, over-the-hill comedian who is never going to see his Mets win a World Series in his lifetime, no matter how much money he spends on those front row seats. Yeah, that's right. I know all about Jerry's very large swath of tickets that he buys every season in the most exclusive areas of the stadium. I did work for the New York Mets right out of college back in 2007. It's my first job in corporate America. And Jerry Seinfeld had his 8 premium box seats right at third base, between third base and home. You're never going to win. I think the Mets are cursed by Jerry Seinfeld. It's true. It's unfortunate. But I do believe these days, for the people like Seinfeld, in terms of their sway, are numbered. I do think that they're numbered. We've got one more story to cover before we go. And with that said, Colin, what is with the Bill Burr clip? Was that something that just happened?
I think so. I had seen it on Twitter, so I just grabbed it. It was Bill Burr responding to Bill Maher's anti-Palestine protester rhetoric.
Okay. Well, listen, Bill Burr is one of the best comedians that we have. He's one of the best truth tellers. He's probably the closest thing to George Carlin that we've really got. So let's hear it.
Realize that college campuses erupted with the kids demonstrating for Hamas. They are in with the terrorists.
He is such a shithead. Like, give me a freaking break, man. They're with the why are these kids out here supporting Hamas? It's no, I can't do Bill Maher. You people. Kyle got his last name. There's a guy on Instagram who does the best Bill Maher impression you've ever seen. Okay, these kids supporting Hamas. No, they're not supporting Hamas. They're supporting the Palestinian people, and there is a genocide being perpetrated against them as we speak.
For the Palestinians.
Well, it's sort of the same cause. Why, are you?
I'm on the side of the kids.
Yeah, that's easy to say. You know, no one wants to see kids dead. This is a war.
That was very brave of you to say that.
This is a war. No, I'm the one who's actually brave on this.
Pat yourself on the back.
It's easy to say I'm for the kids. Who's not for the kids?
Well,
it comes down to real hard-nosed decisions. Like a country.
Stop talking like you're a general.
A country got attacked. Israel got attacked.
I'm not saying that they didn't have a right to go back. I'm just sitting there going like, how do I look at
We're the only country in the world that they get attacked, and then as soon as they counterattack, it's like, well, we got to stop this shit now.
It's occupied territory, Bill Maher. It's occupied territory. The Palestinians have been living under bondage for over 75 years. And I know you want to pretend that isn't what's happening, but that is what's happening. And that is why they're reacting the way that they are.
Don't attack them. There's a very simple solution to all this problem in the Middle East. Stop attacking Israel.
Hey, you
Stop
just solved
attacking
it.
Israel.
You just
I did.
solved it.
I actually
There you
did.
go. That's fantastic.
Anyway.
All right.
We don't need to get onto that.
Let's go to Russia and the Ukraine. How do you solve that one, Bill? Let me hear your hard-nosed decision about that. Well, let me ask you a question. How is war still legal? All this shit that's been canceled.
Legal.
Why is that still fucking legal?
Would you like a real answer to that? Because for something to be illegal, you have to have the capacity to enforce it. And you can't enforce against war, or else you have to go to war with the country that's going to war.
Bullshit. We are supplying the weapons, the money, the resources to Israel. And despite what President Biden wants you to believe, that he now all of a sudden is not sending weapons of war to Israel to complete their genocide in Rafah, that is what's happening because we have oversupplied them for the longest time. He is just politically posturing at this point, and we all know that there is a heavy contingent of Christian Zionists in this country, and they support the GOP. So by that measurement, it is a lose-lose situation all the way around, but we are past the point of no return. We have been there for a while. And the fact that he is for somebody who tries to come off like a know-it-all, he knows nothing.
And we don't want to go to war with Russia over Ukraine. What would be the sense of making it illegal? Oh, that's really going to stop Putin. No. To stop people from going to war, you have to also put
You can't sit down and talk it out. Why can't Putin do a podcast with the head guy? Like, you just solved the Middle East on a podcast. Why can't they solve what they're doing on a podcast?
See, this is why this is not your thing.
Make some hard-nosed decisions. It's not your thing. It's what you...
It is my thing.
It isn't your thing.
This is not your thing.
You're like that guy that has a fantasy football team and thinks he's a fucking GM.
No.
He is like, Bill Burr is the closest thing to George Carlin that we have today. He really is. He is the closest thing we got. And he is nailing Maher to the fucking wall. And to Bill's credit, Bill Maher's credit, because we've got two Bills here, he kind of is smart enough to know that I really shouldn't challenge Bill Burr because he'll bury me where I stand. At least he's smart enough to get that, but then he made this smart-ass comment at the end. This really isn't your territory. It's my territory. And Bill Burr's like, the fuck it is. Wise talking points. Very wise. I know normally I would suggest that Bill Burr would have the desire to really stick it to Bill in that instant, but I can also understand he's doing this interview on his podcast at his home. It's just him with cameras around. It's not like it's in front of a studio audience. It's not like he can just, get up and walk out if things aren't working out. But kudos to Bill Burr for somebody finally sticking it to him. It's so beyond the pale at this point that Bill Maher is able to get away with what he gets away with. And that's also one of the detrimental components of his show, is that he doesn't have people on there that are going to push back against him, at least certainly not anymore, and probably hasn't for a very long time. The transition with Bill Maher, but the problem with Bill Maher is that he's probably always just been this way. Although I do believe that when he started wearing those smart glasses, that is what took it to the next level. That's of his buffoonery and his aloofness and elitism, because he's got it all. I mean, he really does. He really thinks his shit doesn't stink. It's quite unique. And what's going to be very interesting to see, and this has been pointed out quite often, and I believe this, it's going to be very interesting to see what ends up happening when a lot of people start trying to come around on this issue. Like Ariana Grande over the weekend had a concert and apparently called for Biden to, try to, have a ceasefire and stuff. It's like, you don't get a pass now. You don't. The only thing that matters is get it, stop it, but you will forever be remembered as a genocide enabler, just like everybody else who encouraged what's going on in Ukraine to continue when they know that there is no way to win. The only thing that matters is how many lives can you save? NATO became what it became. It expanded even though it wasn't supposed to, because we believe in world domination. Can't do that now. And if you think that the problems that are existing now with what's going on in Ukraine as a result of Russia finally deciding, now we're really going to show you how shit really goes down. Now, what do you think is going to happen when China tries to do the same thing in Taiwan because we just can't stick our fucking noses where it doesn't belong. That's the Ukraine, Russia, that's the appetizer. China, Taiwan, that's the entree. That's the real war. And that is a war we don't want that, guys. And as I've always said, it's very easy to wax poetic about what's going on in other parts of the world, and especially in wars that we're not involved in with boots on the ground, although who the hell knows at this point, we probably do have boots on the ground. It's always easy to pontificate, no pun intended, when it isn't your ass or your kid's ass that are the ones fighting. Let's see how much Jerry Seinfeld really wants that war to go on in Israel if his kids have to fight in it. And the same is true for any politician. The same is true for that jackass politician from Rhode Island who was the one who was handing out all of the Ukraine flags when they voted for the $80 billion war package. Are you going to be waving that stupid flag around if your kid has to go fight? Probably not. But there is a lot of money to be made. There is a lot of war to be fought, and we'll always fight it until we collectively, as a society, step up and say, we're not having this anymore. Which is why the bullshit that comes out of people like Bill Maher's mouth have to be pushed back on, especially like somebody like Bill Burr. Bill Maher didn't even attempt to push back. How could he? He got called out, and he didn't know what to say. What was he going to say? Well, you're totally wrong. No, he's totally right. That's the thing. He's totally right. Bill Burr is right. And I love how he has to do it in true Bill Burr fashion, which is you think you're like the guy who wins the fantasy football league and think you're a fucking GM. And he's absolutely right. It's like, Bill Maher, stick to fucking comedy, which you're not even that good at. I'm very appreciative of all of you who have come here today. This has been a very enlightening conversation, as I hope it has been for all of you guys. Thursday night, I'm going to have our friend Osiris from Middle MAGA. He is going to come on. And we're going to have an interesting conversation. We're going to talk about DJ Khaled. For those of you who do not know who he is, I recommend you look him up. He is one of the biggest cowards in all of the entertainment industrial complex, maybe the biggest. And the only reason I'll say that at this moment, and we'll get into it on Thursday, is because he's Palestinian. And he also lives here in South Florida, not too far from where we are. And he's a bitch and a coward. And I will talk more about that on Thursday. So smash that like button, share, subscribe, do all those wonderful things that we ask you to do. You know we appreciate it. Donald James, Travers, you don't like my music, Schultze, obviously great to see you, Donald. Of course, also great to see Steve Grossman. Great to see Mario. Great to see, I'm just going to say Chewy. I'm going to call you Chewy. CHXV, whatever you want to call yourself. But I'm going to call you Chewy. Richard. Yeah, unfortunately. But remember, you got to call him Zionfeld. Remember, Zionfeld. Danny Wyndham, of course. Great to see you. Holly Horn, great to have you here. Yes, but no. Great to have you here. Who am I forgetting? Big Dumb Animal, you were great as always. Great to have you here. I think Arjun Sankhill. Definitely agree the takedown of Pelosi was pretty significant. Got Milk. That's definitely, for those of you who don't remember the Got Milk ads, those were fantastic. Great name. Definitely agree with that one. Chris Garrett, great to have you here. I think that just about wraps it up. I mean, this chat was lively tonight. We had a pretty good audience too. I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. I think it went really well. Kiera already sent a text. Dirtbag or Dirt Bagel, good to see you. Always happy to have you here. Even with people I don't agree with, I want you here. I like having commentary. I do not believe in, I really do believe in free speech. I am living proof of that, because there are people who I do not agree with and they comment. And as far as I'm concerned, always, always, always welcome dissent. Bride's Biscuit, thank you for coming. Jeffrey Ginter, great to see you and appreciate your commentary. Michael Cooper, great to have you here. Let's see. Anybody else? Anybody else? I think we've William Maban, Jessica Mai, or I believe Majorano. Great to see you. I know it's been a while, as you said, but it's great to have you here. I think that's about it. I do believe that's about it. Linda D, right? Linda D with the comment of the night. I'm giving Linda D comment of the night if that's going to be a thing. And I would debate whether he actually ever was funny. He had some funny moments, but I am not going to be giving him credit for that. Teddy Cool, and thank you all. Smash that like button, share, subscribe, do all those things that we ask you to do. We'll continue to do. Lots of big things happening down here in South Florida. You know the website to go to if you want to help out. And of course, as you know, with what we've got going on here, share, subscribe, do all those things that we ask you to do. We'll see you Thursday.